Well, welcome to Autism Odyssey. I am your host, Betsy Hicks-Russ, and I am joined here today by two of the most remarkable women who have tremendously changed my life and my son's life for the better. They are the ones who directed me towards Joey's living outside the family home. And I'd like to introduce you all to Pam Blanton, who is the CEO and founder of Partners for Housing, as well as her lovely sidekick, Janie Martin, who is the Director of Customer Solutions. So welcome, ladies.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Betsy.
You two are my little angels. I love you. I have so much appreciation for you and the path that I took to get towards where Joey is now in a shared living situation. When we talk about the topic of living independently outside of the family home, not just independently by themselves, but with either a roommate situation or with a caregiver, or all the different options that there are. You explained to me early on there are roughly four categories. I've talked about these a lot in previous posts that I've done on social media, but I'm a category kind of girl. I like to break things down. So do you mind if we start with that? If you could explain the most common four options if you are a parent wanting to see your child be able to have a living situation outside your family home in many different scenarios, what are the four options in the United States do we typically have?
Thank you for having us, Betsy, too. We appreciate it. We're excited.
Say that.
Cheers.
So, it's difficult to talk about housing across the nation because different states have different programs and the nomenclature isn't consistent from state to state. So
Yes.
we have to talk generally about how they look rather than what their official name is.
Perfect.
Okay. So typically, and I'll be referencing the state of Washington because
That's where I am.
that's where we are, but we are also serving families all over the nation.
Wonderful.
But today we'll talk about how they call the programs in Washington, and then the families that are listening can say, oh, that's like this same program here in our state.
And if you do know some other names for it in different states, feel free to throw those out too.
Okay. So in Washington, the only entitlement for housing is called an adult family home. And
So I want to back up for a second, Pam,
Sure.
only because I was the person who understood nothing.
Okay.
And when you say the word entitlement, I want to make sure that everybody understands that entitlement means that by being a United States citizen
and having Medicaid and the need for support services, you can
Perfect.
get this. You don't have to be eligible for services through the Developmental Disabilities Administration or through other home and community services or other service systems. If you have Medicaid, then you can get an adult family home. Other states call adult family homes a group home. So it is typically up to 6 people living in a home that's owned and operated by a caregiver. So these homes are licensed by the state. The caregiver owns the property or rents the property, has control of the property, and provides care. And they're contracted with the state. Room and board and care are all included. The individual themselves pays a contribution. So they'll pay all of their money, typically all of their money, except for about $100 a month toward room and board and care.
And when you say all of their money, that means the money that they receive for Social Security or state funding. That's
Social Security, SSI,
Wages.
Social Security, and wages.
wages, right?
Yeah. And so there's some different programs. If the adult family home is owned by a nonprofit, it might be less of a contribution because maybe they got public funding for
Right.
housing. But typically, they'll pay, their contribution is all but about $100 of their money, and then Medicaid kicks in and pays the rest.
Okay.
It's 24/7 care. It's a model that was originally designed for seniors, so we think of that kind of
I
living.
think of it as like the old time, at least when I was young, they were called convalescent homes.
So similar in that, but there's homes that serve just younger people with developmental disabilities, which is great, because it's not always an appropriate fit to put a 21-year-old in with a 90-year-old since they're
Right.
completely different stages of their life. So that's an adult family home, also known as a group home.
And when it's interesting because when I first started to play around with all of this, I found that those were the only types of homes that were willing to take Joey. It was those situations. They didn't have necessarily a lot of activities. They didn't necessarily do a lot of, well, especially with Joey's diet, that was going to be next to impossible for us. So that really wasn't an option for us. But please continue on.
Yeah, and because this model was originally designed for seniors, they're not really planning activities to go out in the community and go to the mall and go bowling, go to the movies, because seniors want to be cared for and left alone. So it's a model that can work, but not for everybody. So another model that is offered by many states. In our state, we call it supported living. This is not an entitlement, and what I mean by that is people are added to this program as funding allows. So, and it's typically for people who need a higher level of support than they can get in that adult family home model. So you see the state will contract with an agency to typically provide 24/7 care to a home where there's typically 3 residents. I mean, sometimes there's 1 or 2, sometimes 4, but the state then contracts with an agency. The agency hires the caregivers, and the caregivers come in shifts. So they're not living in, they'll come in for 8-hour shifts, go home and come back the next day. This model is more expansive in the services that they provide to people, and they get people out in the community to do fun things, and they also provide that support.
Right. And they can be very successful. I know several of my friends who have children in this type of a situation that it's really, really successful. It is, again, with Joey having so many food dietary restrictions, I wasn't really happy about what the options were going to be for him. And more importantly, that there would be an infraction, like he would grab somebody's Doritos or things like that. That was a big concern of mine. But quite honestly, none of the ones in my area were willing to take Joey because he does have extremely high needs. And one of the things I remember you telling me that was important is that they have tremendously high turnover because they are really contracted. They can only pay caregivers so much. Even if they got a really good one, they can't really pad the wage much. So the caregivers are coming and going really fast, and nobody gets as much of an opportunity to know your child.
50%, 50 to 70% turnover.
Wow.
And so it is high. They're definitely low wage workers. You could often get paid more working at Dick's Burgers than you could. Yeah. And so then there is a high turnover there. And like you said, in these models that are run by the state are really empowering to people's choice. So for Joey, if he wanted to eat Cheetos, they would probably let him eat Cheetos.
Yeah.
Right? And they can't say we're not going to have any Cheetos in the house because roommate wants to eat Cheetos, right? So it's hard to control that. What's nice about the model is that the care is there. Families of course they can come anytime and they can go home for a sleepover or whatever, but they're not responsible for any of that care.
Right.
They don't have as much, choice and control as they sometimes families want to have, which you had to have for Joey.
Exactly. And I did. Yeah. Which is so great. All right.
And so those are 2 models offered by the state of Washington. We see similar models across the nation. And the third model I want to talk about is called shared living. Now, shared living is a family-driven housing solution. This is something that families have been doing for years on their own because the models offered by the state were either not available or not appropriate or not desirable for them. And so families have been doing this on their own. What we started doing in about 2013 was to help families through this process so that every family didn't have to invent the process over.
Right.
So what we do is in shared living, families have a lot of control. They have control over location of the home, control over roommates, control over who's the caregiver. It also takes a lot more work because the families are setting it up. The families are identifying the roommates that are a good fit for their loved one. But also it's very important that the parents share vision and value because they're going to work together to set up the home.
Yes.
And so that's really important. So what we do is we help families get all the benefits that they're entitled to from the state, support services, food benefits, Section 8 housing subsidies, make sure they have all the full amount of Social Security that they're eligible for. So we make sure they have that. And then we have a roommate matching pool where families can go in and search through potentially compatible roommates to find someone. And so the families choose the roommates. Once they have a group together, they can come back to us and we can lead them through the steps of setting up a shared living home.
Obviously, this is the path I've chosen. So I want to talk more about that in just a second. But first, just finish this up with the fourth option, which is the private housing.
So there's three that I talk about mostly. There is a fourth option called a companion home in Washington State. It's really like adult foster care. So a family could say, we want to have this individual come live with us. There's no roommates. It's called a companion home.
I hadn't heard about that. Yeah, right.
There's not very many of those. There's maybe 75.
Are they in other states besides Washington?
Similar models.
Yeah.
Similar models called something different. But it really, when you think about it, think of adult foster care, only one person. No, there can be other kids in the family, but only one person.
Right. That's new to me.
And then that caregiver contracts directly with the state,
right,
in Washington. So
interesting. And then of course private, because a lot of people have said with all these great private places, but they often are ridiculously expensive. I mean, costing the family $5,000 to $10,000 a month for a lot of the private.
So there's some facilities across the nation that are like what we would imagine to be assisted living for seniors. It's a fully private pay model. An example would be Stevens Place in Vancouver, Washington. So if anybody wants to look up that, it's beautiful. It's a wonderful setting, but because of the way Medicaid funding works, you cannot use any of your Medicaid funded dollars there because they still look at that as institutional, even though if you walk into it, you see this is a very happy, fun place where people are there by choice. So that is, that's another model that is fully private pay.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Okay. Perfect. I posted about this a while ago because that we chose the shared living model for Joey, which is fabulous. And I think this might be as good of a time as any to explain what it is that we did for Joey. So we're going to talk a lot about Section 8 housing here. So the first thing that you gave me a checklist of things that I needed to do. And one of the things is I immediately met with Joey's DDA caseworker, case manager, to help me get the top amount of benefits that I possibly could, which was a process in itself. I actually hired an advocate to help me find where the gaps in Joey's funding was so that I could, in my best possible way, help improve the amount of hours he was getting from the state. I'm very well aware that many states out there don't give money towards the parents taking care of children.
We were just recently talking with a California family, a different name.
I don't.
But it was just like, it's the Medicaid funded personal care hours. At the federal level, they call them community first choice hours, CFC, you might hear them. Different states might hear them, but it's when the state would come in and do an assessment based on Joey's needs. They say he needs X amount of care for those activities of daily living, cooking, cleaning, shopping, personal hygiene, what those types of support that he needs.
I want to go back because I know a lot of people are thinking this right now. So we've got some children that are under 18 who are hearing this and they're thinking what it is that I need to do. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. But you are not going to be able to get Social Security income until you're 18. Is that correct?
The individual can qualify for SSI when they turn 18. And the family could qualify if they were Medicaid eligible family. So if it was a low income family, extremely low income family, they could qualify for some Medicaid services prior
Okay.
to age 18.
Okay. So once that 18 hits and you're receiving now the Social Security, the next step is then you go with your local DDA. Is it called DDA in different, what's it called?
Yeah, but we're talking about the
Every state's
developmental disability support
Thank you.
system. So it could be called,
So many acronyms,
yeah,
okay? There are so many acronyms.
yeah. It's the developmental disability service system.
Okay.
Okay.
So they would go to there and then potentially start receiving services. I'm getting parents saying, nope, we don't get that in this state. Nope, we don't get that in that state. It's kind of amazing to me.
Some people can't get anything for 10 years. So it
I know.
depends on the state.
That's the other piece of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could do a whole other show about getting Social Security. So that I don't want to get into it too much about the delay now in getting Social Security and all of that, but we can't really focus on that as much right now. But once you're actually receiving, and like you said earlier, he also gets what was formerly known as food stamps, but it's called different, food assistance, basically.
Yeah.
And then they have like the certain states have waivers, which help support more independent type living. And there's those things as well, too. There's a lot to know within it. But if you have a good case worker or case manager for your child in your local area.
Well, so the Medicaid funding is a state program.
Right.
So you should be able to go to, but your case manager that you have through the state mental social service system, we recommend though that you find that local agency that can help you prepare before you go to the state. So what we often do when we go into a new state, because we don't know their Medicaid program, we can help families on getting benefits, the other benefits, and talking about Section 8, which is a huge value. But we look for that organization in that community that can help people access services through the state. So it might be an ARC, it might be another organization that can say, hey, here's what you could be eligible for, and here's who you contact. And so you got to find that local advocacy group to help you.
Important.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important.
Pam, just to rewind, and Betsy, when you started with us, talk about how that process started, Pam, because that really started with the benefits and housing review, where we started identifying gaps in Joey's services.
Yep. So the first step with us is the benefits and housing review, and we look at what services you have,
right,
and what services that you don't, or what services you need to maximize. And there's that time, there's the child system up till 18, and then people are transitioning into the adult service system. So it's a little different system there. But the benefits and housing review is the first step, so you can get everything while they're living at home, so that when you're ready to move out, you have that.
And Jamie, that's an important point, because that was something that I had the benefit from immediately. Like, even though I was waiting for the Section 8 to come through, I was immediately getting discounted on our internet. I was immediately getting discounted on our gas. I was already getting the food, but I started getting more services so I could start hiring more help, and it helped my transition go a little bit smoother. So it's something that you can do now if you're in the position for it, which is important.
Yeah, you got that lovely long email from us with all of the list of steps to go through.
It was a tad overwhelming, I'm not gonna lie.
But they're there, and then you can come back, right? And we could help you step through that.
I know.
Yeah.
I had to look at the whole process as do what I can do today and not feel like I have to do it. And quite honestly, emotionally, I wasn't fully ready to let Joey go yet anyway. And this is something I really want to say out to those out there who are thinking, I can't do this. I can't let my child go. I can't do this. And it's like, just start laying the bricks. You're not going to have your house built tomorrow. So just start laying the bricks, just start putting it together. And what you find is, in the process, you are finding you're getting maybe more help, more hours, whatever, more light at the end of the tunnel. And it's becoming easier to grasp the idea. And it took a full year from when I first started with you to when he moved in, which is not really that long. but that year helped me transition my own mindset into what it had to be. I think the reason for both of you that I couldn't wrap my head around it was because I just couldn't visualize what it looked like. Like you guys had told me kind of what it looked like, but I couldn't visualize in my scenario with a child who had extremely high food intolerances, with a child that would melt down and scream super loud. What apartment is possibly going to take him? Like all of these things were going through my head, but then one by one, the solutions started to come. So now we need to start talking about Section 8 housing because a lot of the questions that were asked for me that I want to share with you later, it's kind of important that we talk about that. Section 8 housing was an integral part towards me being able to afford this option. And the reason is because I don't own a second home. It would be nice, but I don't. And because I don't own a second home, I needed to find an affordable way for him to have rent. Now, my particular city is not cheap. The average home rental is in the 3 to 4 thousands. The average apartment rental is really in around the 2,000 mark, somewhere around there. So that was definitely not something that was part of our salary that we could even contribute to. But the Section 8 made it possible. So let's talk about Section 8. And I'm a very, very bipartisan Switzerland, middle of the road kind of person. So we are not talking political parties. We're not talking good administration, bad administration, anything like that. But the one thing about HUD, I will say that most people have told me it's not going anywhere in this capacity is due to the fact that it's a program that is very successful, that there isn't waste, that there is a great, great track record. Do you feel HUD for now is somewhat okay and solid, or where do you feel is, and why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about what HUD is for people with disabilities?
Okay.
That's a lot. Sorry.
No, that's okay. So HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development is HUD. It's a federal program. I've been working with the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher program that's funded through HUD since the early 2000s. And I've never seen them take a voucher from somebody. Sometimes there's more available, sometimes there's less available, but it's a huge.
It's like pull somebody who already has a voucher. You're saying they won't take away their voucher.
I have never seen them take a voucher away from especially our lowest income, most vulnerable population. So Section 8 is a federal housing subsidy that's administered by local housing authorities, and it's for people who are low income. And people who are extremely low income, which is below 30% of median income, have priorities for these Section 8 vouchers. By the way, all of our family, loved ones with disabilities that are have solely SSI, they're at about 16% of area median. So they qualify for this benefit. It is a benefit where the individual themselves pays 30% of their income, approximately 30% of their income, toward rent and utilities, and the housing authority pays the rest. And so it can be a really huge benefit for a person who's low income. But a lot of the benefits comes from the other things you can request if you're a person with disabilities. So for instance, you can request reasonable accommodation for a living caregiver, which is what you did for Joey. And so then the housing authority will pay for 2 bedrooms based on 30% of Joey's income. So you can offer free rent and utilities to your caregiver, which then helps you start to put together this nice compensation package.
Thank you. That was perfectly said. So in my situation, here's how it is. I received the housing choice voucher, which allows me for him to live in an apartment of my choosing, although there is a cap on it. It's not, I can't pad it. For example, if Ron and I found an apartment that was a little bit nicer, but we had to contribute $200 a month towards it, that is not an option. You have to be within the parameters of the housing voucher. We found an incredible apartment. Joey lives there with his caregiver, Nick. Nick loves the situation. He gets free rent and he gets a 40-hour-a-week salary. He gets a lot of time off. We make sure of that. And it's been incredibly successful, so much so that Nick told us the other day, he's like, I'm not going anywhere. Like this is he really likes his job. And
Yay.
it's going tremendously well. So that's how it worked. But there's so many questions about the housing. And I went through when I talked about HUD on my TikTok and Instagram, I went through it and pulled a bunch of the questions that people were asking. So one of the things that a lot of people said to me, and I don't really understand this. So first, let me paint the picture of what it looks like to apply for Section 8. And I'm sure both of you could give some other, but I'll tell you how it was for me. Jamie and Pam gave me the website, which is, what's the name of the website again?
AffordableHousingOnline.com.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
What many people don't know, the biggest mystery is how to get Section 8.
Yes.
What many people don't know is that you can put your name on as many lists as you want
Yes.
across the nation. And if you get a voucher in a particular jurisdiction, you need to live in that jurisdiction for 1 year before you can transfer it. But if you're a person with a disability, you can request reasonable accommodation to transfer that voucher immediately. And so that's what you were able to do, and what 25 other people we helped last year get a voucher in their hand within a year. So you go put your name. So it's called AffordableHousingOnline.com. This is a website where they look at.
Yeah, and I gotta say, as the person following through, it was not hard. It's not. It's in fact, you can do it. A lot of the places use the same portal of it, so that when you fill out the information one time, it'll copy and paste it to like the next application. So, so I did the very, very first one that I did was Maricopa County, which is in the Phoenix area. And that was the very first one. And then every day I would go back and I would do one more application, and they send you, hey, there's new openings here and there's new openings here. And I just kept applying and I kept applying and I kept applying. And then one day I got a letter from Maricopa saying, the very first one I did, saying he kind of like won the lottery of it, which is he was brought in. Now it took us from when I got that letter a full year before we actually got it. But once I knew we were ready to go, then I could start making plans. So one of my questions to you is this. I have so many questions about who can apply for this Section 8 housing, but that people had asked me. But one of the things that many people said to me, and I still don't understand this, they said, we've been on a waiting list for Section 8 housing for years, and we're still waiting. And that doesn't make sense to me, because isn't all of it like a lottery system? There is no waiting list. Can you?
So first, I want to take one step back and address something you said a minute ago about it. Once Joey's name came up on that list, it took you a year to get the voucher in your hand.
Yes.
That's not typical. There were a lot of bureaucratic barriers in your situation.
What had you for? Okay, let me tell you, there would have been a lot of panic without you.
Typically, within, what would you say, Jamie, 60 days, there's a voucher in the hand. So it shouldn't have taken a year. But so that being said, so like I said initially, it's a program through the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Money goes to local housing authorities, sometimes housing agencies, depending on that particular jurisdiction.
And Pam, just to qualify, it's income based.
Yes, income-based program, completely income-based program. So every housing authority is going to have their own waiting list. That's why we say go get on all of these lists, because you're on 40 or 50 lists, you got a better chance than if you just put yourself on the name of your neighborhood housing authority. You could be on there 10, 12 years. But if you get on 50 different lists across the nation, your chance of coming up is going to be higher. You also mentioned lotteries. So many housing authorities now do a lottery. So they'll open their wait list for 2 weeks or a month. They'll get as many low-income people as possible, and then they'll do a lottery to add those people to the list. But it's each housing authority is managing their own list. That's why you want to get on lots of those lists.
Okay. Are there some of them that literally you can be on a waiting list for? What you're saying is they're not all lotteries. Some of them are actual waiting list.
So when you apply, when a list is open, they'll do a lottery. Many will do a lottery and then put you on a list, and you'll say, now you're on the list, or sorry, you didn't make the list. So it's just in that process of time
Yeah.
when you're gathering names.
Okay.
Once you're on a list, you're on a list. Depending where you landed on that list, how many vouchers they have, you know.
Right. Okay. My next question that was a lot of people asked is what types of disabilities qualify for reasonable accommodations?
Any disability that can be verified by a third party qualifies. So Section 8 is a low income a program for low income people. And if you have a disability and you're requesting reasonable accommodation, you have to submit third party verification of that need. So you got a doctor to sign off that said, yes, Joey needs a live-in caregiver. He can't live alone. That was an accommodation. So it has to be verified by a third party.
I'm personally not familiar with is there are people saying to me, I'm on dialysis. Do I have a disability?
Yes, I would say that's a disability. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I'm sure they can get third party verification that they can't work, they're low income, they need whatever accommodation it would be.
Right. So it can be a physical, but ADHD is not considered. Is that going to be considered?
It can be verified by a third party that says yes, he needs that. So with the reasonable accommodations, they're all approved on a case by case basis. So here is my person, or the person is writing it themselves. This is my disability. This is why I need a live-in caregiver, or this is why I need to have. I need to rent from a relative, because you're not able to rent from a relative typically with Section 8, but maybe you need to rent from a relative for certain reasons related to your disability. So you can request that.
Good. That was a question I was going to ask down the road. Now, what about if the parents of the individual own a second home? Can they collect rent?
So typically you can request reasonable accommodation. You need to say why that home benefits the person, gives the person access to community, right? So they kind of want to know why another home wouldn't work. So if somebody needs certain physical modification, that makes it easy. If they need to, our folks need long-term stable housing. They don't want to, they're worried about renting from a private market landlord who might sell their home in a year, and they're finally settled in, and now they got to start all over because they have to then learn the bus again, and they have to learn their neighborhood again. So long-term stable housing is another good thing, or another reason that we can request accommodation.
To rent from a relative.
That's great. Okay, so that is a possibility. I wasn't really sure about that.
Not renting their bedroom in your family home. So that is typically not approved, although we have gotten a few of those approved for people who had Hoyer lifts and used wheelchairs, because the market out there's not enough accessible housing. And if they couldn't find something, we have gotten a few of those approved. But generally, it's in a unit separate from the family member they're renting from.
Okay. And I think you've pretty much answered this, but a few people told me, I have a disability and I have children. So will that accommodate could they possibly accommodate a larger, like a 3-bedroom, to be able to accommodate their children as well?
So like I said, it's a low income based program. So if you have 3 children, you're going to get more than 1 bedroom, right? You're going to get enough bedrooms.
Okay.
And if you have your 3 children and you also need a live-in caregiver to help care for you, and maybe to help care for you because of your disability, you could get another bedroom for that too.
So when I did receive this, and then in my situation, I got my voucher through Maricopa, and then I made a request to port it to Bellingham, which is the city that I live in now. And so so my first question with that I know a lot of people have asked me is, aren't this, and I know I asked you this several times, like, aren't they skeptical? If you're applying for housing in Maricopa County, but you live in Bellingham, are they thinking, oh, they're not going to stick around? Why should we give them the money? What I know, one of the things you told me is it doesn't really matter because it's federal funding. It's not like the city of Maricopa had to pay for that.
It's federal money, and of course they want to keep it in their communities. But the reality is, and it's allowed in the federal regs for you to put your name on as many lists, and porting is a stated allowable accommodation request. So usually when you're applying for other housing authorities, you're exploring all different housing opportunities. And, you could move to that city too,
Right.
right? Some people do move.
Right. Yeah, no. Okay, that's all I kind of wanted to know that. Now I want to talk about what it was like then finding an apartment. So let's just use general round numbers. So approximately I had $1,500 to work for in rent to find a 2-bedroom for $1,500 for rent. Now, you know, if you know anything about my area, that's incredibly low. And so most of the options that I had were in already low income housing projects. But there really wasn't much of anything like that, except for I came up with the idea that what about student housing? Because we have a university in our area and there's a lot of affordable housing in the university area. So that was exactly what I found. I found student housing. So it's in a young, hip area with young people, and which were Joey's age and his peers. And I was able to find an apartment within that, which was fabulous, but I did have to work within the parameter. Now, I am very fortunate that my landlord and management company were willing to lower the price of the rent. I think they only had to lower it like $25 or $30 in order to make it eligible, but they did that for us, which was incredible. But we're also kind of like there for life. They're used to having these students come in and out. And we're like, we're not going anywhere. Like, we're here for a very long time. So I think that kind of goes into my next questions is about how many people told me I have Section 8 housing, but I can't find anybody to accept the voucher.
Yeah. And so, first of all, I just want to go back just a little step. Every voucher has a maximum limit. You said yours was about 1,500 for two bedrooms in your jurisdiction.
Right.
The payment standard is the maximum amount that HUD will allow for a particular jurisdiction. So some areas the numbers are going to be higher, some areas are going to be lower. And it's typically about at the middle range of what can be available for housing. In the state of Washington, our housing prices have gone through the roof, and the housing authorities haven't done a great job of keeping up, although they're starting to do better. First of all, depending on the time of the month that you apply for your apartment and how many vacancies they have, they adjust their prices all the time. So don't be afraid to ask if it's $25 or $30 over.
Right.
You often will be able to get that. Many jurisdictions have ordinances that won't allow landlords to discriminate against people who have Section 8. Some of them understand those rules, some of them don't.
How bad? I mean, I went to a couple of landlords and told them about my son, and they, as illegal as it was, they point blank said, "I'm not interested in having a disabled person here." Like, I was told that several times, actually.
Yeah, when I walked beside a few families to find housing, I always went back afterwards and said, just to say you can't say that violates fair housing laws. But
Yeah.
but that's the rule. What we do, though, often is get engaged and talk to the landlords about what great tenants our
They
loved
are.
ones make, because they are there. They're not throwing wild parties.
Right.
They move in and they're there, and they're going to be good residents. They're going to be paid. The rent's going to be paid on time, and they stay for a long time because they get to learn their community and the bus and all the things they need. And moving every year isn't what they're interested in doing. So What I encourage families to do is, when you're out there looking and you find a place, just say, hey, do you take Section 8? A lot of apartment buildings do, and they understand it. So it wouldn't be a problem. If they say, well, we don't really know, then you can say, well, here's a picture of my son. Here's what we're trying to do for him. And, share your story a little bit. And then, you know, if you had gotten stuck because we were working together, I would have called the landlord and said, hey, how can I help you with the paperwork? So I'll tell you, once we had a family, a shared living home, three ladies, and they were moving in with their living caregiver. They found this townhome that was the perfect location, perfect. And the landlord was like, I don't know about Section 8. He didn't even want to do automatic payments for rent. It's like write a check. I mean, the paperwork thing, he wasn't interested in having the government in his business. I said, hey, so the families told their story. And I called them up too, and I said, hey, I'll walk you through it step by step. It's easy. I'll help you. And so I walked him through the whole process. And then when he was done, he said, wow, that was pretty easy. And, by the way, I've got 4 more units if you have more people. And we got 3 more, a house of 3 more with a living caregiver in one of his other units. So a lot of times it's just about explaining and understanding. And when you're saying they're going to have a living caregiver, if they are, not everybody does.
Yeah.
They're going to have a living caregiver. There's somebody that's going to be here with them, and you'll see they're the best neighbors. They really are the best neighbors. So
it's been so fabulous, and people, and that goes back to the whole student thing. Is I've already shared with Pam and Jamie, like we've had all of our neighbors, the 2 that are right next to them upstairs, and then their neighbor downstairs, have all welcomed us and Joey with open arms, and they, because the younger generation understands neurodivergency like no one else. Like they really get what it is. In fact, one of his neighbors actually is autistic, and it just warms my heart so much, because the one thing I thought we were going to have the biggest problem was that the neighbors were going to complain that Joey was loud. And so on day 1, the day Joey moved in, I wrote a letter. I copied it. I put a letter at the front of everybody's door, and I said, explained our situation. I gave my phone number. I gave Nick's phone number. I said, please call us first if you have any problems. And I also called the police department, and I said, I would like you to know my son's moving into this unit. And if he does scream loudly and he's never hurt, it's not about that. And so by doing that, all these people came out of the woodwork, and they're like, no problem. We welcome him. We're so happy that he's here. And it really helped, because so many people just get upset in that kind of curious way of, is something wrong? But it's just Joey. Oh, it's, everybody just calmed down a lot more.
I think writing that letter and introducing yourself and reaching out was a wonderful thing. And because when people don't know,
right,
then they worry, like you say,
yeah,
what's going on, right?
It's been extremely successful for us. So we're very excited. I have to say, it turned out way better than I could have ever imagined. That's probably the best way to say it. Like, I could not have imagined it going as well as it's going right now, because Joey spelled to us within the first week, I've never been so happy.
Oh, yay.
He's so happy.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how to work with you. Because we have people all over the country who are thinking, oh, I want to be a part of this and I want to understand this better. And I was grateful because in my state of Washington, they actually paid for my first consultation with you. But your first consultation is not crazy expensive. And then we met, and then I understood what my options are, and you gave me a bunch of assignments, and I started to work on it. And then once I had the Section 8, then it was time for me to kind of hire you for the big consultation, which I got to tell you, there were so many times that questions came up, and Ron and I looked at each other and were just like, you guys were worth your weight in gold, because honestly, like, I don't know what would have happened. I think I would have lost my Section 8 voucher had I not been coached through the whole process. So I just want to tell everybody that they're working with them, the fees were well worth it. In the long run, the amount of money that I'm saving by having hired you is huge. So anyway, go ahead, talk about.
So our first step is our benefits and housing review. It's an online questionnaire. You can go to our website and purchase it. It's an online questionnaire. Once you complete that and submit it, then we're in touch with you within 3 days, typically, to schedule a follow-up consultation where we'll meet on Zoom for about an hour and go through what we see. So we're looking at, what is your vision? What's your hopes and dreams? What benefits do you have? What are the options? And I'll tell you, we've helped families create 66 shared living homes serving 134 people. And every single one of them looks different because they're all created for that particular individual, just like my home is different than your home, right? Where all of the situations are different. So what we really want you to do is to know that you can dream big and help you figure out how to take the steps towards your vision. And a lot of that means we want to first get all the benefits they're entitled to, look at Section 8 and how that can help you. Because Section 8 is the secret sauce that makes a lot of things work, that is the biggest mystery to most people. And I'll just take a little step back. In the late 90s in King County, which encompasses the Seattle area, our local housing authority recognized that they were not serving people well. So they called together all the social service systems, mental health, developmental disabilities, people living with AIDS, seniors, veterans. It was 9 social service systems. And they said, if you help your clients get through our paperwork process, find a place to rent, and be a good tenant for 1 year, we'll give you vouchers. And the program, I was part of the planning committee for that. The program launched in January, early 2000. And so they started handing vouchers to these social service systems. Soon thereafter, I became the housing coordinator for King County Developmental Disabilities Division in downtown Seattle. And we recognized that so many people weren't able to get through the process, and it was because of reasonable accommodation that we were able to help them through. So we learned a lot about reasonable accommodation. I think our families need them more than anybody, and how do you write them, and what's possible, and all of that. And in a period of 5 years, we moved 450 people onto the Section 8 program, out of their family home, onto a Section 8 program. So, we've helped, probably 10 times that over the years. I never kept track. I only know because we won a housing award for that period of time. So I knew. But the beauty of it is when you work that much with one program, you learn how to make it work for our families. And so not very many people have had that kind of experience that we've had here. And so we can really help you access that. So that's the first step, is the section, going through the benefits and housing review. We send out a survey to everybody afterwards, and our average, and I think there's, I don't know how many surveys we've had, but many, our average response is 9.2 out of 10. Thank you. We finally found somebody that could help us think through all the social service systems, how they interact, so people find a lot of value, sometimes just in the questions themselves, because they get you thinking about things you hadn't thought about. Once we're done with that consultation, we say, send you a follow-up list, bullets, boom, boom, boom. Here's what you need to do, so that you have it in writing and you can start working on it. For people who are interested, we also have a roommate matching pool, so we can invite you into our roommate matching. Now, Joey doesn't have a roommate. He has a living caregiver. That's still shared living. It might be 2 roommates and a living caregiver, or 3, or it might be 3 people and care coming in during the day. They don't need a live-in, whatever it is. But finding families to partner with so you can create this housing solution that's unique for your family is what the roommate pool will help you do. Because, it just takes, it's not always easy to find that right match, right?
Absolutely.
Even people that since they were 4, right?
It also could be fun for certain individuals who really are looking for socialization to be able to have a roommate to be able to talk to connect with.
Yeah.
So that's also a big plus. I want to explain a little bit about the caregiver before we finish up with this today, because first off, for any of these things that Pam and Jamie are talking about, their website is Partners for the number 4 housing. So Partners for Housing, the number
.com.
.com. And so, go ahead.
Let me just say one thing. The cost for that first step for us, the
Yeah.
access to the benefits and housing review, the review of services, the follow-up consultation, and access to our roommate pool, which is by invitation only. Most people are invited in, but sometimes sometimes there's another option that's a better fit. The cost for that is $500. Okay. If you join our webinar, we offer webinars every other month. You can sign up for those on our website. It's question and answers. Families come back time and again because we show a short video and then we just open it up for questions and we answer everything.
And you have a lot of free information on your website.
There's a lot on our website as well. If you attend one of our webinars, we always give $100 off coupon, so you can get it for cheaper. In the state of Washington, we were funded by a grant. We're looking to other states too. We're doing a lot of outreach to try to bring this to other states, looking for funding sources who can offer it, pay for it on behalf of the families. But we get families. I just had another family from Massachusetts yesterday. So anybody can go up and sign up for it.
Amazing. So the question that is asked a lot is, what does the caregiver situation and how do you find a caregiver? And I got very lucky. It was a perfect timing, which is for us in that Ron, my partner, he's not technically my husband, but Ron, my partner's son, was kind of in transition in his life at the moment, absolutely loves Joey, and decided he wanted to take the job. And he got hired by the state. So he's paid directly from the state for his 40 hours. And then he gets free rent. And our situation is something similar to what you suggested. Joey lives with Nick full time, except for he comes home and he's with me all day Wednesday and Thursdays. So Nick gets a nice break in the middle of the week, and then he's with me every other weekend. So that's the general requirement. But I also really recognize I don't want Nick burning out. I want Nick to really like his job. So Ron and I are forever being like, hey, we'll just keep him an extra night or something like that. When we know that he's been, he wants to go on a date or something like that, like, we'll just keep him tonight. Or, why don't you take a little vacation and I'll take Joey on his own little vacation. You really want to pamper your caregiver as much as you can, because it's not a ton of pay and it's not a super bougie lifestyle, but helping them, like, for example, if they're a student and they want to go to school certain hours to work around their schedule. That is my situation. Is that typically how it is for most families?
So I'll just say, hiring the caregiver is the hardest part.
Yeah.
We don't recruit. It's hardest part because we don't recruit caregivers. So what we help families do is put together a nice compensation package and look at how to give the caregiver enough time off. Most of our caregivers that are supporting, 2 or 3 people, most of them are making, $3,500 to $5,000 a month. It's tax-free if it's Medicaid funded and they're a live-in caregiver. They get all their housing related costs. And then there's
utilities.
Yep. And then we have to make sure they get enough time off. So typically we start with saying, 20 hours off Monday through Friday and every other weekend. Now that's just to kind of put a framework around what's realistic to keep people from getting burnt out. And sometimes it's more if people have really intense, behaviors or challenges, they might need more time off. And sometimes it's less if people are super independent and everybody's kind of coming and going. But that's sort of how you think about it in terms of it's not mom and dad. So it's not going to be a 24/7 thing. And if you pay well and you treat them well and they get enough time off, you can retain them. And that's the goal, is to recruit and retain good people.
We added in some benefits. We pay for his cell phone bill. We also pay for his car payment as well. We actually helped him buy a car, but then again, it's Ron's son. So I mean,
But other people do that too. If they need a car at the house to transport the young people out to their activities, families will do that, right? Whatever it would takes.
So it's so great for him because he was in a real turning point of his life and really needed to save money. And so he commits to this for a couple of years, and he's able to just keep saving and saving. And like I said, Joey's just so happy to live with a dude instead of his mom. He's just happy for that. You guys, you've both been amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Is there anything closing that you just want to mention? Jamie, we haven't gotten to talk much here, but is there anything that you wanted to pop in and say?
No, I think Pam covered it. I'm just appreciative that you had us on.
Oh, I love talking with you.
We love hearing Joey's journey. It's a blessing, and it's so exciting when you post a new video.
There's so many of them.
And we're just so grateful to be able to do the work too. It's really meaningful work, and to watch families thrive and grow. And like you said, it's hard when you're trying to let go and they're trying to move on, and it can be, a challenge. But when you start to see Joey thriving, and when you feel like, oh wow, now I have, I'm not doing 24/7 care, so I can be.
Oh, I'm a whole new person. I'm a whole different person. My calmness, my attention to Joey. We have so much more fun now because Thursdays are our big adventure days. And it's just a whole different ball game now. Everybody is just doing so much better because of it. So
awesome.
Great story. Yeah. Thank you both.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Betsy.
Everybody we'll be back next week. We'll be talking about craniosacral next week. So thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you.
Stop. How do I